Welcome back to the Storyteller Soul Lounge. We are on episode 3, Swipe Left for Villain. Now, in episode 2, when I was doing the speed dating technique, I had created 5 characters for the Revisionist, which is the show I'm building from scratch right now. And I realized that all 5 of those characters are heroes. And that's great because I wanted them to be the sort of misfit group, kind of like Six of Crows from Shadow and Bone. But every good hero needs a villain. So I did not have in the Soulful Storytelling Lab a tool or technique that would help me figure out the villain character. I have one specific template that's called the Character Deep Dive, which mostly focuses on individual characters, but I wanted to create something that was sort of a continuation or spin off of the speed dating technique. So I came up with the blind date technique. And I made this one last week for myself, and I'm very interested to not only see what comes out of using it, but also put it in test right now as we speak. Because this will be the first time I'm using it. Anyway, the point of the blind date technique is to it can be used in two particular, areas. One, you're testing the tension and the dynamic of your hero and your villain. So you put them up in a sequence as if they're going on a blind date or meeting for the first time, and then you see if their personalities will unfold the way that you would like them to. And then the other time that I feel like I can use this, or anyone else who wants to use these methods, is to test the chemistry between two rom-com characters or romance characters, or basically if you have two love interests, to basically test that out. And so in this case, we're going to do the hero versus the villain. Now, in the speed dating technique, we met Ben Harlow. And so now I have a name for my villain. His name is Nathaniel Alcott. And he's going to be the worthy adversary of Ben Harlow and the group of kids that Ben oversees in the Revisionists. So I have to do two very specific things in the blind date technique as I'm doing this. I already sat here thinking about how I wanted to approach this. I realized that in the way that I did the speed dating technique, which is putting on a bunch of different silly costumes and showcasing what's going on in my imagination by acting as the characters, was a lot easier in the speed dating technique. This one is a little more difficult because it's not a lot of improv necessarily. What I have to do first is I have to get into the sandbox and write the scene and then read it out loud too, because it's harder for me to be more intentional with Ben and Nathaniel and envision what they're saying. So this has to come more from like write it out first and then see what unfolds. What's going to help create continuity or consistency, if you will, around the scene in the blind date technique, but it's still off the top of the head, is Ben and Nathaniel get a location. So they're going to meet somewhere. Sometimes it's not an actual blind date. Like Ben and Nathaniel, in my case, I'm not going to have them on a blind date. I'm going to have Ben being set up for a blind date, and Nathaniel happens to be at the same location that Ben is waiting for his date at. It turns out Nathaniel set it up. So I'm going to have that happen. It could be like in a lounge or something very classy or whatever. And then the other thing that factors in is their core archetype versus the mask that they wear. Now, what I mean by this is Ben Harlow is a hero. That's his core archetype, which means most of his behaviors, his choices, the way he carries himself, it's all going to be in that manner. The mask is the archetype he's going to wear in this particular scene. So I've put him in the role of the trickster, the mask. And Nathaniel, being a shadow archetype, his opposition is going to be the guardian. He's going to be wearing that mask. And essentially what this means is as they go into the scene, what I'm going to do is, for fun, I'm going to alter their behaviors and the way that they go about achieving their objectives in the scene by behaving as such, rather than their normal selves. And that's the other thing, is the objectives. They each get 3 of them, and each of them have a different goal. It might be an emotional, it might be a social one, it might be a career one, depending on what inner goal you give them. They have to achieve that by getting it out of the other person or vice versa. And so there's got to be like these hidden pressures that they're trying to put the mask on to avoid the other character from seeing, and they still have to kind of honor that mission. So, in the case of the objective, it's what they want, and the mask is how they're going to get it. And then, just like the speed dating technique, you will basically come up with a fun bunch of blind date questions, depending on the sequence, and ask them these questions in their character form, and they would answer in their personality. So, I'm going to probably do maybe like a 1 or 2 page sequence. I'm going to write it out and then see what comes out of it. Um, let's see here. Let me open my script thing. I'm going to move this. You might hear a noise. I'll be gentle. Okay. So we're basically going to create. Now I feel like I'm too close to the camera. Okay. I'm here on my random page. I use Highland like a cheap human. I don't have the money for final draft or anything like that. So, okay. Um, trying to come up with this while in podcast mode. This is gonna be interesting. Okay, so we're going to set the interior scene. I'm gonna be vague with some of this in the script because it's not gonna matter. This is just for fun. So it'll be at nighttime and like a lounge bar, jazz music playing in the background, which ironically there is jazz music playing in the background as we speak. But the setting itself doesn't matter as much in this technique, so you can be very light with it. I'm going to be, because my mission is the relationship, the dynamic. So Ben Harlow is. I don't write like this on the regular. This is literally a sandbox. So any of the things that I might write like is going to sound a little generic. Like I said, the things that sort of matter to me are going to be the dialogue and the way that they interact with each other. But the good news is you can always go back and polish. All right, so you don't have to sit here and watch me do this. I am going to finish writing this script, and the next thing you're going to see is the reenactment of the script with the 2 characters. Do you mind? No, not at all. Rough day. I'm sorry? Well, you're not exactly nursing it, are you? A liquid courage, really. Um, I'm sort of meeting someone. Blind date. Well, in that case, barkeep. Another for my friend here. Thank you. You're a far braver man than I. I'm sure you have no trouble in that department, handsome man like yourself. It's a rarity, given the nature of my work. What do you do? Investments. I look for potential where most miss it. I'm sure a man like yourself can appreciate that. What makes you say that? The good ancestor? Not exactly light reading, is it? I anticipate all variables, which probably comes in handy in your line of work, Mr. Alcott. Alcott? As in Nathaniel Alcott. The one and only. And what exactly does Copper Shell's vintage soul have to offer a man of your caliber? I have no interest in properties, Mr. Harlow. I invest in people. You never told me what it was that you do. I'm a professor at the university. Ah, yes, the nobility of wisdom. A gift and a curse, I imagine. If by curse you mean dealing with disengaged youngsters all day, then absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Mr. Harlow. Enjoy the rest of your evening. You as well. We're back. We're going to ignore my terrible acting job there for the scene. It turned out to be about 3 pages long. And what was happening for the objectives? Ben's first objective was a little more difficult for me to write, and I noticed that's not what manifested out of this particular sandbox scene. I think I was just I was leaning more into Nathaniel, and I noticed it in the beginning was a little latent, like their energy felt a little latent when I was writing it. Ben wasn't strong enough, Nathaniel wasn't quite there, and then as they were getting into the past the formalities of this first encounter and started talking about like Nathaniel's reasoning for being in Coppershell would be I started to feel more of the like dance, the game. But Ben's initial objectives in the scene when he was being the trickster was he was trying to solve a riddle or solve the puzzle that was Nathaniel Alcott, and then he was protecting himself so from exposing vulnerability, which is why I had to be super vague about him being a professor. He didn't want to mention like his daughter or anything like that. So that was okay. And then the last mission he had was to not present weakness, which um, there's a body language moment where Nathaniel tries to use that, where I had Nathaniel mention Ben's last name and Ben did not tell him his name. So there's like a moment that I wrote in the script. I don't know if it conveyed on screen, but Ben basically hesitates. He's gulping his drink very slowly when he hears his last name come out of Nathaniel's mouth because he did not tell Nathaniel who he was. So that was kind of Nathaniel pushing the button a little bit. And then the other thing I did try to lightly sprinkle in there was the trickster behavior. When Nathaniel says a gift and a curse, I imagine Ben deflects it by saying, if by curse you mean, being around disengaged teenagers or whatever all day at the college, then absolutely. He tries to deflect by throwing it around Coppershell's vintage soul, perhaps the dispensary or the Radigan Hotel. But Nathaniel did very easily. I felt like it was effortless to use the core shadow archetype and marry it to the mask of the Guardian because the Guardian is holding something protective. It's a shield. Nathaniel felt a little more effortless to write, but Ben felt more effortless to play because I'm used to being more like Ben than I am Nathaniel. So even then it was harder. But anyway, Nathaniel's mission, let me remember how I created these for Nathaniel. Nathaniel's mission, his private objectives were, where is Nathaniel's objective? Okay, there they are. Nathaniel's objectives was to test his adversary or test his foe, test Ben's intelligence level. And then he was to earn Ben's trust. I think he did that pretty easily in the beginning by buying him a drink and talking to him casually about dating. Conceal his true identity. That I failed at. He told his last name Alcott. Oh, wait, no, his true identity. Yes, no, that was not in the scene at all. He knows Nathaniel Alcott by fame and stuff like that. But I just realized that technically I know something that I've put into Nathaniel as a character trait that Ben still doesn't know in the scene. So technically, I did conceal his hidden agenda and his true identity. So essentially, what the blind date technique does is showcase whether or not these two particular characters, the hero and the villain, if you're sensing an effortless dynamic between the two, then I feel that um, it would work. Other times, it might not be as easy to write a scene. I still feel like this is a surface level conversation. Obviously, if it was more geared towards the actual like storyline, this scene would scream and sing and have way more in-depth conversation pieces. But because it's a blind date, you always, or at least I do, want to test my characters in surface level scenarios so that way I know that naturally they should be able to be put in an environment like this and still have that kind of tension. Now, also, the other thing I'm not going to say, because I'm not an actress, so even then when I'm reading the dialogue out loud, I'm sitting here going like, I couldn't play it that way, but I can picture someone like Nathaniel Alcott specifically is modeled after Hal Ozan. I think that's how you say his name. He was in Dawson's Creek. He played Cassidy in Kyle XY. I love his energy. I think that I recently watched a White Collar episode with him in it as Gordon Taylor, and I love Hal's energy. So I think that if someone like Hal were to be Nathaniel Alcott, he would deliver very well. Ben Harlow has been modeled off of Flynn Carson and Milo Thatch in Atlantis. So Ben should have that very like nervous, anxious energy, but he's also British. So someone like Tom Hiddleston or um, I'm not sure. Brain's not coming up with another actor, and normally I have them font. I just don't want to fall to like exactly who I'm thinking of. Anyway, with other people in this role, I can see Nathaniel and Ben having a tete-a-tete, essentially. So even for a sandbox scene this simple, I personally think that Nathaniel Alcott is my guy. So for episode 4, we will officially go back to deep diving more into the anchoring method and using the TV overview template, which means we're going to go back to official season overview development instead of just focusing on characters. So, anyway, if the blind date technique is something you guys want to play with, by all means, go for it. It was also my first test run with it, and so I think the more I do it, the more refined it gets. But it was fun. I'll see you guys next time in the lounge. Sorry for the messiness, but that's what we're here for.